Aloha guys, this is Dr. Tom Walker coming at you from the Hawaiian Islands. Our recent videos have discussed energy. We discussed it from a purely scientific point of view. Things like cosmological constant and zero-point energy and Heisenberg uncertainty principle, which is not real energy, but it mandates that this energy exists. And we ended our last video talking about Dr. Hal Puthoff's, who's likely to, it's hard to say, but I would say, here's what I'm trying to say. Puthoff is probably the leading authority on zero-point energy or quantum vacuum energy in the world, very likely. If not, as I said last time, he certainly is among the world's leading experts. Now, he's done a lot of work. He's best known for remote viewing. We're going to have a lot of talk about that because it's one of my favorite topics in the near future. But we were talking about a paper he wrote back in 2002 called Searching for the Universal Matrix and Metaphysics. And the point that Puthoff was making is that what the ancients or the pre-scientific people were talking about in various spiritual disciplines and religions and cosmologies, when they talked about a grand, undefined type mystical spiritual energy, and what we've discovered in with quantum mechanics and modern physics, they're talking about the same thing in his opinion. Now, there are a lot of people who believe that. I do too. But there are a lot that would argue and say, oh, no, that's just it's nonsense. I mean, what we have is backed up with theory and mathematics. But the fact of the matter is it sounds very similar. So I suppose it's a matter of opinion. Now, where we left off specifically was that Puthoff made a couple of really, really bold suggestions. And one is that he has suggested, that's what we're going to talk about right now, is he suggested that this energy is responsible for the force we know as gravity, and also the phenomenon we know as inertia. So we're going to talk about the gravity of the situation right now. Okay, Newton described gravity as a mysterious force that acts at a distance. Einstein's amazing general theory of relativity stated that gravity and acceleration are indistinguishable, and that gravity results from the presence of matter curving the actual fabric of space-time, somewhat like in this drawing here. Planets orbit a star, for example, because they follow the curvature of space itself. And of course, time is also affected by gravity, the presence of gravity and the relative strengths of it and all. Now, myself, I've often thought there might be something else. The universe is amazing, but for every particle with mass, every molecule, every light beam, every mountain star, galaxy, etc., to be warping space-time in a semblance of a physical sense and unimaginable complexity, things might get a little crowded. Maybe the force provides an adhesion or a drag that we perceive as gravity. Now, that's come to me. Of course, I'm not a physicist. I have a background in healthcare, but I've studied physics and stuff since I was a kid. All right, so here's what the great Dr. Puthoff has to say about it. One of the most amazing suggestions by Hal Puthoff is that gravity is actually a direct result of zero-point energy. Here's how he describes it. In my second study, I developed the idea put forward as a hypothesis by the famous Russian physicist and human rights advocate Sakharov, that the gravity of Einstein's equations is not a separate fundamental force, but rather is a pressure force derived from partial shielding of the ambient zero-point energy. Rather, a pressure force derived from partial shielding of the ambient zero-point energy. Very thought-provoking. Currently, gravity is recognized as one of the four fundamental forces, along with electromagnetism, the strong force, the weak force of nuclear decay. Now, Dr. Puthoff is making a bold suggestion here. We briefly mentioned the Caspari Effect earlier. It's often used as a phenomenon that supports the existence of zero-point energy. When two metal plates, like we have in the drawing here, are positioned close together, the smaller concentration of zero-point energy between the plates is overcome by the larger amounts of vacuum fluctuations or energy outside the plates. And so it pushes the plates together. Now, I mention this because one thing that's important, it is accepted in conventional science that this is this is proof of the existence of 0-point energy. But also, too, this is in a rough way similar to what Puthoff is suggesting about gravity. This is somewhat similar to what Puthoff is suggesting for gravity. It results from a pressure force due to the unequal concentrations of the fundamental energy. It's important to understand that Puthoff is not saying that gravity is the Casimir effect. I'm the one making that comparison only for illustrative purposes. But it illustrates what he is suggesting about concentrations of 0-point energy. Dr. Puthoff goes a step further and suggests that the 0-point energy is also responsible for inertia. Here's the great Isaac Newton, by the way. Nearly as amazing as Puthoff suggesting that inertia, the tendency of mass to remain at rest or continue in a straight line of motion unless influenced by an outside force, is also an effect of 0-point energy. This is really getting out there. I like it myself, but it's a it's a free country. We have a right to like whatever we want. Now, I know what you're thinking. You say, but Dr. Tom, how can you possibly support such nonsense? Well, I'll tell you why. Because number one, I think there might be something to it. Number two, I don't have a university position. I'm worried about tenure. I do teach college, and I don't have a lot to lose because I don't have any scientific reputation anyway. Resting and moving objects. In a forced study with colleagues from Lockheed, SIPA, which I don't know what that is, and Cal State at Long Beach. This is all the references to, again, we're talking about Puthoff stuff. We have shown that the simple property of inertia possessed by all bodies is simply resistance to being accelerated through the 0-point fluctuations. I will say that some years ago I had the same kind of an idea. It's gone through my mind. Believe me, I'm not trying to take credit for anything. But I think it's a possibility. An extremely fundamental result in physics that provides an underpinning for Newton's laws of inertia. This is an extraordinary suggestion, but it is a logical conclusion in light of what's been discussed. And it's simple. A fundamental energy which is responsible for gravity and inertia and the formation of particles gives rise to our world. Sounds pretty good to me. Universal entanglement. Now, quantum entanglement is another catchy thing you hear a lot about nowadays. We'll talk about that. I know. You know what I'm going to say. Very soon, down the road a little ways, in the near future. Universal entanglement, my third study, also in physical review, I showed that on the cosmological scale, a grand hand-in-glove dynamic equilibrium exists between the ever-agitated, I like that, motion of matter on the quantum level and the surrounding 0-point energy field. One consequence of this is that we are literally physically in touch with the rest of the cosmos, as we share with remote parts of the universe fluctuating 0-point energy fields of even cosmological dimensions. We are all interconnected. All points in time and space are connected. Yes, when I start talking too vigorously. Who is to say whether, for example, modulation of such fields might not carry meaningful information as the popular concept of the force? Now, this is Puthoff saying this. I agree with this. So he's made some startling things here in this one paper, which is one of the reasons, or the reason why I like it so much. He suggests that the ancient spiritual energy talked about in pre-scientific days is likely the same thing that we've discovered in more recent times. That it's responsible for gravity, that's responsible for inertia. That all points are interconnected because this energy is entangled on a cosmological scale. Pretty interesting stuff. All of these characteristics, the underlying ambient random quantum 0-point energy C, as a blank matrix upon which coherent patterns can be written, such information constituting at the bottom end of the scale coherent particle and field structures, and to a 0-point energy chauvinist like myself, again, these are Puthoff's words, an ascending ladder of possible other information structures, whether it be coherent electromagnetic field structures around living organisms, possible non-biochemical components of memory, or other more esoteric aspects of nature. Now, he's in this one paragraph, he's presented some interesting points, but it's a little hard to understand just because, like scientific papers, they use rather sophisticated wording and verbiage. If my goal for this research comes to full fruition, what would emerge would be an increased understanding that all of us are immersed, both as living and physical beings, in an overall interpenetrating and interdependent field in ecological balance with the cosmos as a whole. And even the boundary lines between the physical and the metaphysical would dissolve in a unitary viewpoint of the universe as a fluid changing, energetic / information cosmological unity. Sorry, guys, talking like this gets my throat dry. Why? Because I'm putting expression into it. I'm not just saying, if my goal for this research comes to full fruition, what would emerge? You dig? If we survey a large group of contemporary scientists about zero-point energy, the vast majority agree with what we've discussed so far. It fills all space, gives rise to atomic structure. That's agreed upon. We really don't know what it is or what it does to any degree. Yeah, they would agree with that. It's the most fundamental substance of our universe, but it's almost undetectable. I think they would agree with that. The virtual particles that comprise objects and energy arise from it, roiling, and I use that term a lot, talking about energy roiling, in an unimaginable and undefined manner. I think they would go along with that. It remains a profound mystery. Yeah, they'd have to. Everything is cool as long as we use the proper term. Call it 0 point, or this should be, or damn. Oh, sorry. I never say bad words, even when I was a paratrooper in the United States Army many years ago. Call it 0 point, a vacuum energy, and it smiles all around. Call it the force, and they go crazy. Why? Because they're against it. Any sort of semblance to philosophy or religion or Star Wars. I agree with Hal Puthoff, the force is with us. We are describing the same phenomenon. The ancients were well aware of the great energy and discussed it in essentially the same way. In a fashion that will soon become more familiar to us, we are rediscovering something that's been known for millennia, the wondrous energetic nature of our world. We'll come back to this very soon. Yeah, I know I keep promising. Our next discussion will concern one of the most profound mysteries in science, consciousness. And we're going to be spending quite a bit of time talking about consciousness. It'll be an interesting trip. Stay tuned for lesson 3. I'm going to shamelessly promote my book again. The force is with us, the higher consciousness that science refuses to accept. One of the most amazing books you'll ever read. Amazing proof of the paranormal. Now, I know what you're thinking, Dr. Tom. Proof is used more for mathematics. And yeah, I know. But for the average dude out there, they see the word proof as the same as evidence. And that's how I mean it, of course. Okay, my voice has given out on me very quickly. But that's good because we're out of time. Next time, we're going to start on a very interesting examination of what's really seriously one of the biggest mysteries in science is consciousness. And we've got several videos that we're going to deal with, or tapes that we'll deal with that on. All right. Be there or be square. Join me for it. It will be very interesting. And until then, this is Dr. Tom signing off.